Dans le dog, le génie de médiévaux, le drogue, n'a pas choisi dans Gourou, ma grande Tata Quilla Tumba Damasadire Sumba Tata Quilla Sumba Damasadire Corota Hode Tata Quilla Sumba Damasare Sumba Tata Quilla Sumba Damala Murder Chill Kana and Damba Tumba to Jinami Cameriba. That Tamboni got a good and Yimina. 香港去了，用个看的去了没特人呐，高先不继续去，看的去了你们那说的，马上讲了，看的去，俺你去到那个秋滚了，等把出啊当，等把当把你是要把命帮，你是要把命，多点钱康熙，等把月饼我不月，等住他打可不起。 我不记看是多点说先看下电报一边我也得住他的开不起香港去了看的起来你们那香港去了我也看的去了国家给先比太不可能他你帮不出的开人啊是大切的帮不出的开了呢你等住几确说呢国家了高啊 点把出把开了，那国家了搞啊，先继续切的，我的先别日把了等呢，周围他的朝开了我瞧，是我等这个桥说呢，他就完了，搞啊先继续切的，我的先把给，你点没周围日把了等呢，周围他的朝开了我瞧，是啊。
So next comes showing that that as far as being for one who is free from these extreme views, that it's similar in all respects, and that's given in verse 387. There's the actual explanation of that, and then showing that the next topic will follow after that. And so this is given in verse 387. If they are not twofold, how can anything have an existent entity? How can there be a truly real existent entity? If that is reasonable to you, also, why raise further arguments? If there's no twofold division of phenomena into real and not real, what, such as particles and so forth, could be real, since all forms of being real have been precluded? If for that very reason we have explained, it is appropriate for you to accept the system which has eliminated these two extremes. Why do you cling to the thesis of things being real and raise further arguments against us?
Oh yeah. 他这个节了，去看了呀，怎么专门的那边开人没人办呢？我根据我们了，那把也我没人的，在那归了看到嘛，等你那边没就说是，人把看给按电动个桥的没住吧是哪是？去他们家让信息当帮嘛，电动个桥的没住吧是哪？国家一切的决定，我等把住吧专门的为切日是。 一切我的就把给俺那电柱主这个是吧？电把主把日本专门的为切，国家给错看那开让我就说是他们给错开让我瞧，其他那个我估计让心电把主是越南是吧？其他那个我估计让心嘛，我电把主是越南，俺那就当见了，没得我去了。 就当见了，然后电把主把人那就见了，没得我嘎克来是到没得我去了，电把主我没完了，电把出去见那也没人的，是我根据我没了，那把也我没人的，是看说的讨价技术搞把怎么的，哪个啦？ 我的特别是像搞这么紧哪个啦？俺那下就跟哪个弄这哪个还是哪个啦？俺那我太太把没把提醒到， 是吧？先路给俺那个啦。特别大家搞这么紧，俺们每个在那每个哪个在那，我太太把每把提醒都是，现在在归纳，在那么归纳是的，在是把这没用把钱看说，连住了在下边的没用把月把的在下边怎么就苦闷了，在那么归纳，电动给人先看通啊听的是。在归纳我去归纳电脑个人上我的看给我去提醒你同学是要哪些钱的去几个的电脑个人先看同学几个在大个那下我几个到我看天天规矩到我写我几个人先去当我的俺的听我去看一那样俺天那人先去当我写这个多年看人吧天天规矩啊，当白人是，去这个当白看人吧，就去现在啊，让些就当白人，去现在让些就当白人讲，去这当地当人过嘛是吧？让地不开吧要是吧？去规矩，天天规矩当白人，这下巴汤，让这不知道啊。
So next comes showing that given that whatever phenomenon was talking about, since it's unreal, to making some kind of differentiation and it being real or unreal is not something that it's inappropriate to accept, and that's given in verse 388. If any reasoning could disprove the thesis concerning the things being devoid of being real, we would be convinced, but since things cannot be proven to be real, you should accept only our thesis. Regarding the non-functional aspects of things, of all things, or, yeah, that's okay. Differentiations are inappropriate. That which is seen in all substantial entities is not differentiable. If the nature of internal and external things were real, they would not depend on causes and conditions, or not be contingent upon causes and conditions. Also, differentiation of being real or not real are inappropriate with regard to things which are devoid of being real. There are no differences in the character of space. The character of space is a mere absence, a mere negation of physical obstructivity, the obstructiveness of physical things. So that's characteristic of or quality of space wherever you find space. Similarly, regarding the absence of something being real, the nature seen in, which is the nature one finds or sees in all, here it says substantial entities, ze or dravya, maybe that could just be taken as referring to just things in general. It says, so the verse 191 says, whoever sees one thing is said to see all. That which is the emptiness of one is the emptiness of all. So what that is referring to is that as sort of the quality of things being, their emptiness is a quality which is shared by all things, but one can't say that in general that the emptiness of one particular thing is the emptiness of another thing. That's incoherent, as was discussed earlier when we treated this verse. But space, as a simple absence of physical obstructivity, is the same space everywhere, even though you have to be able to differentiate space according to regions and so forth. So that concludes that verse. Yeah.
对是吧？所以告诉，看给我天堂我没写就吧，天天让行，天天我归他吃把没事去看给看啥了说话，去看给我天堂，俺那让行就没把，让行就这个我没把小的做啊，天天俺那去归那样，俺那让行就做啊，我归那样，俺那让行就做啊，怎么没把？让信息知道，让信息知道是怎么没把这个先有去把送回去了，让信真正来插把门大人听，我归来插把门，这送把大人去看了样，那么出啊，他马这边那边你没呗，去他们家让信息懂吧？那边你没，那边没就说，
So then the sutra here, there's a sutra passage cited. I'm going to translate that a little bit different from the way that Ruth did. So here it says that one who understands the absence of something being real, or the literally it's the non-existent quality of things, then one has no attachment to all things. So here the first things, she's restricting it to functional things, which is sometimes the case, but here one can talk about it as far as being like things in general, and then as far as the non-existent quality of things, if you read that as referring to the absence of intrinsic existence, which is a non-existent thing, a thing which is not functional, a mere negation, but nevertheless is a property or quality of everything. If one who knows that has no attachment to all things, and the second case of things also could subsume both everything, both functional things and non-functional things. So just as that sutra says, one has no attachment, it says there, to all things, and that's what that is referring to, is when one has realized that the imaginary real quality of things that we superimpose onto them is absent, then one no longer clings to them as being real, no longer has that kind of attachment to them, and therefore is free from that attachment. So that's just as the sutra says, that there's one can't differentiate within any phenomenon whatsoever as it being real or not real in the sense some absolute or absolute way.
Oh yeah, that kind of that you won't go by la, then don't be chalk la racing, then don't be chalk the cat milena, land everybody 10 minutes time. Oh, I don't see she be trying to go out. That don't get chalk the cat racing, then don't get chalk cat malena, land everybody said, they don't care nothing. I just don't want to drive. 他这没几先就错了嘞，就把明白传那里，但这几多人就讲几千的专门就是，哦，他还是多帮我都吃完，安尼电动个错，开让我瞧啊，然后安尼哦，电动个错开让我抬了，两大把的瞧我。 这那没几先几错了是这，就是要把开人把抬了，哦，就是要把开人把抬了，两大手机，去他那，等不住那把他们这都没呗，啊，其他两大把掐，在那两马没把你多娘那，马没把你多娘那，看的他们这没被吃。 我看见他们这没背起，我我先去去了，两脚把门把插那，哦，这把门呢，他这没过关，他这没背起，我先去去了，两脚把门把插那呢，当你准备，当你准备等这个多备桥啊，当你准备等这个多备桥，桥上给桥江机器呢，俺那这把门就把当，让就专门的呢。 等着专门的，安尼哦，现在让新把开了不做的搞把那个我们那个写的，安尼去年没把我去到他，让新里面呢没把到个那没，这把他这种你看没开没来呢，去年没把我去到是，到底呢？
So now then next comes a rejection of the opponent's position that is asserting that the Madhyamika view has faults in it, and this shows that that one is unable from the Dendongi Chokilang Rikshing. Okay. Here the first part is saying that it's appropriate to accept the position that things are devoid of being real, and if one doesn't accept that, it would be appropriate to make this kind of reply that the opponent is saying, but one cannot do that, and showing the inability of the opponent to do that. So that's the first part of this, and then the second part will come later. So in verse 389, there's a challenge laid down. After analyzing this through reason, you should either accept emptiness or make a response to it. And then the objection is given by the opponent here. It would be appropriate to make a reply if the slightest thing were accepted as real. But since, according to you, everything is non-existent, how can any reply be made? So the opponent here is taking the Madhyamika position that things are not real as entailing that things are completely non-existent. So, and then the opponent is saying, how can we make a reply if everything is non-existent? And then the answer to that is given in the verse. If, owing to non-existence, you claim no reply is made to the other's thesis, why should you not also prove your own thesis, which is refuted by reasons? If you claim that no reply is made to the Madhyamika thesis because everything is non-existent, why should it not also be proper to prove your own thesis, which is refuted by the reasons that prove emptiness? Since one cannot refute another's thesis without proving one's own, yours has become non-existent.
Oh yeah, that didn't it? Dendon Siji be Chonya Gawani, Dendon Siji be Chonya Gawani, Siji be dancing Lashi Jidan Jana Yang, Shenji Chola Jenja, but need to chi minutes. That I look to Minijang. Ani Shanjo Siji but Cheba get dancing about Lasse. Siji be dancing yes. Lashi Jidan Jana Yang, said, yeah, but Lashi Jidan Judge Charles Shana. Tendana Siji be dancing yellow Chelaya Yebes. Tendana Siji be dancing yellow Chelaya Yebe. Chujijang, Shanjo Oma Walla Genjabani to Jiji Minina. Tena Chuji Shanjola Genji Minibe, Ani, or Tony Siji, Gitanti, Ani Milavo.
So then next comes next then comes the assertion of the opponent. Even if one is unable to prove one's own thesis, it is said and well known in the world that reasons which refute others' theses are easy to find. The answer to that is given in the verse 390. Though the world says it is easy to find reasons with which to refute, why can the errors regarding the other's thesis not be stated? Since in that case, you too must be in possession of those easily found reasons with which to refute the thesis that the Madhyamika is proponing here. Why are even you unable to fault the other's thesis, that of the Madhyamikas? Thus, as you are unable to fault the other's thesis, reasons refuting emptiness are not easy to find.
Oh, yeah. That's somebody you made the loop. Chumba Damatella, some Yebenane. The Northern Jimmy Tism, you drew Mujuba Chumbata. They mean that was some determined Drubata. Jidembe, Demba Yoba, Tanya Dive, Demba Yena Jidana Yoba, Tekonani to Chuba Mideba, Lasungan, the Northern Jimmy Tism, you drew Muju. Chumbani, Yoja Chawa Tamshiki, Kade Tening Yena. Major Chawa Tamshiki, Mabayani Chim Mitures. That Riban Drumuguba, Riba Meba, Riba Meba, much Riba Drumuguba. Yoja Tamshiki, Anish, Kade Tekwanan over to Yana, Kade Tening Yana. Hojaki Damba Major Chawa. Tamshiki, Demba Mebayang, Yani, Junzenji, Duba Minjude, number time to the river to share. Oh, Major Chawa Tamshiki, Mebayani, Minjuro. Ribatumba said, Tejiru, Wujan Nige, 니수 마와 사네 이 매바 마와 저 탐자단 저雄主버 차오 서 니수 마와 니가 니수 마와데 다 대바 주베 니수 매바 마와데 사네 이 매바라 대바 주베 이 매바라 마와 저 탐자단 저 아니雄主버 차오 주로
So next comes the demonstration that the reasonings which attempt to establish things as being real, whether one's talking about things being existent or non-existent in a real sense, are equal and equivalent. And that first part of that is showing that one can neither establish nor not establish things as being devoid of being real or as being real by mere words. They're equivalent in that respect. That's the first thing that's given in verse 391. If just by saying they exist, things really did exist, why should they not also be non-existent just by saying they do not exist? If even without reasoning, but merely by saying the words they exist, things existed in reality, why should their absence of being real not also be established merely by our saying the words they are not real? The reasoning is the same in all respects. Therefore, rejecting assertions regarding these two extremes, we should both firmly establish a system free from all elaborations which assert the non-existence of the two extremes.
Oh yeah. That demba yoba ani ming da ba zamji de du ming da ba zamji ani twen mo zhu ba demba mo zhu ba de kanji yue jie ming da de jie me ba ming ju na kanji yue jie ming ja ba de jie yoba ming ju ro oh Diri mewa, tuan taba ngobo mena, tuan taba chubi ngobo yana, ngobo ye shewe, ane ming miriba jude, right? Tuan taba ngobo mena, ane ngobo me shewa ki, ming miriba jude, mashangi pula yedo, she ming miriba chino shena. Dati, sheba chade, kangi chi ngobo ye chi, dochi ming taba tichir, kanji ye chi ming da, ngobo chitana ngobo teta yeba ye chi, ane dochi ming da vi chir, yeba ming da vi chir. Demba meba ming ju na, kangi chi demba ye chi ming cheba tichir, demba yeba kala soro si, demba chi ming da wa teki demba meba ming ju na, kangi chi demba ye chi ming cheba chi, chi demba yeba ya ming ju ro, kanji ye chi ming cheba tichi yeba ming ju ro, mi leba la sharwa shewa tang, se tsuma la tsirin shewa tuen mi zhuba shino.
So next comes showing that things being, one isn't able to establish that things are real by saying that they exist in that way by mere linguistic designation or by merely ascribing that name to them. And so this is given in verse 392. The opponent here asserts, if things do not exist ultimately, the designation things exist is incorrect and as unreasonable as saying that a barren woman's child or son exists. And then the reply to that is, if a thing is not non-existent because the term existent is ascribed, neither is it existent because the term existent is applied. And so the commentary here says, if things are not real because of the designation they are and exist is ascribed to them or designated upon them, neither are they real because the designation they are real is applied to them. Calling someone with good eyesight blind or someone with a short life long-lived does not make them so. Besides, if things could be accomplished by words alone, it would be just as reasonable to accept that they are unreal as it would be to think that they are real.
Oh yeah. That day, he called us all. 这中国人就说，咸阳这么几天中呢， 这个脚把咱们就团住呢，咱把有些倒把大人，咱把没把呀看历史是吧？咱把有些到这个脚把咱们就咱把要把安尼也去，咱把要把也去呢，要把去呢，这个脚把咱们咱把要把去呢，安尼这个咱把没把脚把咱们就样，咱把没把开呢，我这想想，这咱们就团住呢，咱把有些倒把的，咱把没把呀看历史。
Again, moreover, if things could be occurred simply by words, it would be just as reasonable that one could say that things are that they're unreal as to think that they are real. If one could just, by the mere words, if words accomplish things, then just as people imagine that things are real, then it would be appropriate to accept that things are not real.
哦呀，那第几节了？几点半？电报员把太阳带来，电报员把电报员呢？电报员把太阳带来，电报员呢？几点呢？要把铁矿那你都出没得把你，几点把你铁矿那你都出没得把你。看着他们这几点半，约半几点把员呢？我刚听你推约吧，听你几点把起注入。看去让他们按让团结让给我等把钱了让给他团结让给我等把钱吧是干起来这个呢让给让星期出用我等把钱吧明的是你呢让给我等把钱对呢没些买呢俺这看这边就了没些买呢碰把些买呢看把就提起国家呢，按你看说的，团结让给我没日币，没日币这些汤，没是吧？这多啊？没日币这些汤，这没得日币这些汤，这些大，今天把他们家了有多些呢哈，也得把这汤。
So then next comes the topic that if it was the case that things were real simply because worldly beings ascribe the designation to them of being real, then that which exists within the world or for worldly persons would be established in reality, and that's not demonstrable. It's unacceptable. So this is given in verse 393, where it says.
Det med har kommit till känna mig med så att jag tar det med det till att det judo
So somebody else asserts words do not reveal an object's character. She has entity, but I would say character, for this is better. Words do not reveal an object's character. If they did, one's mouth would burn when saying fire or be full when saying pot. Therefore, we assert that ordinary people all have the means of expression and terms for that which is being expressed, which do not touch on an object's intrinsic character, own character or intrinsic character there. And then the reply to that is if everything is a convention because expressed by ordinary people, how can anything which exists as its own reality be as in reality be a convention? So that's the opponent's position was given first.
Oh yeah. That day,我刚听你推吧，听你几点把记录下来的，我他们家让先去约进。太大个让给我了，我让给，你得看着每日比战那么几次，每日比战那把那大看着点那个，你看了快要的，都开始战那么几点半结班，几点半了要把一拿3点，我刚听你推要把几点听你不行，要把几点半了要把一拿，我看让先去要把听你。제 권한 유도 여봐 인지 되니 지된 바를 지주를 된다고 여봐 권한 주로서 라시지 여바니 태코나니도 여바 인지 되네 지단 바야 지지 되나 바야 코나 주로서
again, these mirikpa.
메릭비 잔남지 세도 되
미륵비.
다른 차시서 바자도 가라 아니 멜라자고야 제심 이라 내가 미릭비 잔남 랑공오라 야마나 랑공오라 메리 베트남에서 메리 지리자 기타남 지리자 베트남 지세기나
So so the answer to that is given in the verse here. If everything is a convention because expressed by ordinary people, how can anything which exists, which as in reality be a mere convention, a convention? How could that be? She has. How could it? Actually, okay, I would retranslate that verse a little bit. If everything that's expressed by worldly beings exists within the world, then why wouldn't that which is expressed in the world exist in reality? Why wouldn't all those things which are expressed within the world exist in reality? So the commentary here says, supposedly things all exist intrinsically, and as worldly things, she has conventions for Jigdamba. I wouldn't go along with that. As worldly things, because ordinary people speak of them by means of words which do not touch on their intrinsic character. But how can anything that exists intrinsically, existing in reality, be a convention, be a worldly thing, a worldly phenomenon? It could only be ultimately existent. Such things could only be ultimately existent, not simple worldly phenomena. No.
매번 이도 준하니 대다이나 천하고 오 매번 밀소 세가 다치중 오 대마 주바 사회 까밤 사회 오 매번 이도 줄으셔나 오 매번 이도 줄으셔나 가정 오고 꾼 대마 매비실 오 주사를 매번 이도 준하니 오 가기 오 매비실 매번 이도 준하니 대마 매비실 오고 그 주사 매번 이도 준하 대다이나 오마비 초나무 그용하고 된중아에 싸도 까비실 오마비 초나 오보 그 된중아에 싸도 까비 오매번 밀소 오보매번 밀소 된중아에 여만용비 대다이나 초나 그스지와 오 된중아에 싸도 까비 오매번 밀소 된중아에 여만용비
So next comes showing that a rejection, that this entails that one falls into the position of nihilism or non-existence, and that has two parts. First of all, the rejection or refutation of the idea that the rejection of things being real entails that one falls into a totally nihilistic position of things being completely non-existent. And that's given in verse 394. So here it says, the opponent asserts, since you deny that things are real, things are non-existent. The reply to that is, if things are non-existent because things all do not exist, in that case it is incorrect that all theses concern the non-existence of things. If even the slightest thing is non-existent because things are not real, it is incorrect that all Madhyamika theses concern the non-existence of things through the refutation of some previously existent real things, for there never has been any real existence.
Oh yeah. Tadine, oh, the new maybe, only the new Yamida Batella. Oh, making Omela, Sibayaba Minduro. Oh, never woman, never can't let Juba churros. That Gachang over, the new maybe cherries. Gachang over the maybe cherry, and it take up again. And then women la, Dama Juba Sibayu, Dama Juba Sibayo Mari, Siba Minduros. Chidena, over Shibala, over me but Matters. Mawata, women, Pumba, your manona. Pumba Shiba Mitebes, Pumba Yamanina, Pumba Shiba Mitebe, or Dendru Mebar, over maybe Dendru Kala, over Dendru Mebar, over maybe Dendru Kala to a chur. And they were Mebar, they say to a Mitebe.
So next comes showing that, it's not, one cannot demonstrate that so one cannot demonstrate, or it's unacceptable to say that because there's no thing which is real, that the non-existence of things is real, or that the total non-existence of things is real. And that's given in verse 395. Since a thing does not exist, a non-thing cannot exist. Or one could say that since an existent, a positive functional thing does not exist, one could say that a non-existent, a non-functional thing cannot exist. Without a thing's existence, how can a non-thing be established, or the non-thing? So since real functional things, the object of negation, do not exist, their non-functional negation, or the negation of the non-functional or non-functional thing, cannot be real. In the world, a completely disintegrated thing is said to be non-functional. For example, a pot which is completely annihilated, has been annihilated, is said to be a non-functional thing. And in keeping with this, a completely disintegrated pot would not be feasible if the pot had never existed. Thus, how could the non-functional be real when there is no real functional things? The existence of a dependent thing is not feasible without that on which it depends.
Oh yeah, that didn't. Tang our Tony Drive better you have Tomba Yeminju or Kabala. Then the year bed, then do you about Hajanta Nisha, you can never done but the pay you have Tomba Minju, Hajanta, you never done but Yi Benani. Then the year bed, then do you about Hajanta, you never done but name. Tomba Denzi Lay Chua, Teji Tomba Minjuna, Tamja Denzi Lay Shani, Maitana Denzi Mays. Oh, that's it. Tomba Denzi Lay Chua, say you got Chuji Tony Jubala, and Denzi Damba Chagolas, the Tony Duchi Ruba Dangures. Tedana Denzi Yebe, over Tamja Tomba Mindes. Tony Duchi Ruba Denzi Yebe, over Tamja Tomba Minde. Denzi Dana Xian, Daba Yubi Chesena. Denzi Yanda Mayimba. Denzi Dana Xian, Daba Yubi Chesena. Oh, Shambi Chesena. Dembe Tomba Denzi Le Truba teachers. Tomba Denzi Le Truba said, Dembe Tomba Denzi Le Truba teachers, Tomba Minjuna said. 아니 대두지 동바 메주나 탐자다 댄지 라시지 주위 셴이나 댄지 라시지 주위 셴이나 아니 데메 텐션도 주고래 대지 동바 메주나 탐자 댄지 레션이 마이 텐이 댄지 메스로 어제래 탐자다 주카소래 탐자다 댄지 라시지 주위 셴이나 아니 데메 텐션도 주고래 그라 탐자단 댄지래 탐자 댄지래 현이 멤버를 라시지 주비 지이나 현 멤버 라시지 주비 이나니 아니 타다 때문에 지용 거외 지용 거외 댄지래 때는 두자 코미니와 태나 댄지 양다 매바 쳐왔다 아니 댄지래 때는 두자 코미니나 아니 두자 그 댄지 양다 아니 매바 타베게 댄지 양다 매바 좋다我等住开了吧了，等着没被人话吃话人哦，等住开了吧了，当然他没被人话的吃话人哦，天气的吃他们家让先没把主播，
So next showing, it comes a refutation of the notion that that because there exist both the reasons and the illustrations or analogies which establish emptiness, that they couldn't be empty. Things couldn't be empty. There's a refutation of that, and that has two parts. First, showing that the extreme consequences that would obtain if the existence of reasons entailed the things existing being real. That's the first part, and then comes the discussion of the examples. So this is given in verse 396. The opponent here says, in order to prove emptiness, you must adduce reasons. Thus, since the reasons exist, things are not empty. For like reasons, everything else is also real. And then the reply to that is given. If things are not, in 396, if things are not empty because they are empty by virtue of reasons, the thesis would not be distinct from the reasons, and thus the reasons would not exist. If things were not empty because things are devoid of being real, and this is established through reasons, and the thesis and reasons were intrinsically distinct, they would be unrelated. So what this is saying is that you have the thesis, which is the thing to be proven, establishing the predicate in the subject as the thesis, and then the reasons or the evidence which establish that. If the reasons and the thesis and the reasons or evidence were intrinsically distinct, they would be unrelated. They would have no connection whatsoever. And thus the reason couldn't function as evidence to establish the existence of the predicate in the subject. If the thesis were not intrinsically distinct from the reason, but intrinsically one with it, they would have to be one, and therefore what is to be proved could not be understood in dependence or contingent upon the reason. Then it follows that it would follow that there are no correct reasons, since the fallacy of there being no reasons arises whenever one asserts that things are real. Therefore, all phenomena are established as being devoid of intrinsic existence or intrinsic nature.
Oh yeah. That is it. Don't be minju wa hasan ta yun never tamba ni. Kanchi don't be beyo ba. Tena don't be minju na. Charo chita tishin do daja na che jeni sam. So take a son do sana. Ginjan kange ji rashi ji chuwe don't be be. 那被孙年的我，咱们没得孙年性，写完那些，那些一直别当被孙年所约把军在天呐，别当知道吧，先约比确实是吧？孙年当知道吧？给，而且他看说的，我不先约比确实是，别等从白宫，我不先约比确实是，当把民主说先呐，别这样，等这个团团这吧是个。 但是他大学堂，但是他给大学堂这话是个蛮这话行，谈不到呢，但是等住国比日本年纪啥事啦，这话行呢，俺那等住国但是等住国比日本年纪啥事啦，啥事啦，等住国比日本他给啥事啦？你话的呢？ 但是他满这边别咱们来团住呢，反正我从没确实是，不但是他满这边，但是他满这边团咱了别咱们来团住呢，我从不去了，去了那不其他话提醒着大家那不一些接女生，女个呢，别要话咱就顶住给别没人少是。
So next shows here a demonstration of the extreme consequences that would obtain if one said that by just the mere existence of the examples that are adduced in a process of reasoning that things could not be empty, and that's given in verse 397. Here the opponent asserts, since there are analogies or examples that are used in reasoning about emptiness, that when one is demonstrating that things are devoid of possessing essence or being intrinsically existent, and these examples are such as a reflection and so forth, everything else like those examples or analogies exists and is not empty. So the reply to that is given. In verse 397, if things are not empty because there are analogies for emptiness, can one say, just like the crow, so too the self is black? Is the analogy related or unrelated to the reason's meaning? So here the point is being that the analogy has to be have a relationship with the meaning of the reason, the evidence that's given in the syllogism. The first has already been precluded by the reasoning which refutes real reasons. That's already been excluded. In the second case, if the meaning is established through an analogy unrelated to the reason, is one able to say, just as the crow is black, so too is the self, because they are alike in being existing functional things. One should be able to do so, yet an analogy merely by virtue of its existence is not suitable as an analogy for something being real.
Oh yeah. 아니 다 라시지면은 매고 그래 쓰라 아니 최지 땡지 쳬비 초반이 거와 강거치도 인스 땡지 좀 땡지 쳬비 초반이 거와 강거치도 인세나 대권은 이제 대연단에 탐지 쳬바 토비치도 인어 다 대연가를 땡지 좀 거와 대 대권은 이제 대연단에 타바다 탐지 쳬비 고마 토비치도 인어 가데 라시지 주변 오예나 대니 또바 제지 어 가데 라시 오예 세지나 가데 라시 중 주변 오예나 아니 대니 또바 제지 돈이 통화라 연내 지시 치질로도 규치로 라시 매발인다 치질로도 규치로 세요电动员的지시 세세我点把想把原呐 아니 대래 사비 코와 칭라서 또바 통화 칭와 데스 다我내가这边 된진 아니 야라 중이지 말이 봐요나 내가想봐요나 아니 대왕이 아니 언니와 도저길래 개미길래 사봐 레사네 아니 코라 레디 대부 랭이고 풍부라나 아니 코와를 코암 아니 코와를 깨와요 와인상 코와라스 또바토한데 최나 라시지메바 투수 슈발레 최탐자 라시지 또바 투수 슈발라 스발라 초와 주에 스바 코알라 초와 주에 nemba 셴베 또바데 nemba 통문 nemba 셴베 또베 nemba 통와나 코알 칭와데 또바 통화 칭와데 nemba 셴베 야나 좀 말이 붙으면 nemba 셴메마 아니 개왕 레사바 인자 nemba 셴베 또베 nemba 통화나 코알 칭와데 되나 가서래 딘지지 셴유 가사다 풍부 nemba 추와니 땡지디로 가비스 다 가자 딘루 와 가사 풍부 라신디 추와 가비 라신디 추와 네 가자데 땡지디 시자완 디로 가비 리비소 자첨보 아니 자첨보네 아니 가자 라신디 추와도 가바차와 이노 니르 되는 디로 가바차
Then, so The question is posed. So here's the next comes in verse 398, explanation of the purpose for teaching emptiness, and that's given in verse 398. Then the question is posed by the opponent here. If analogies, reasons, and all things do not exist, what is the purpose of writing all of these explanations in your treatise, these expositions of these subjects or chapters? The reply to that is, if it is for the attainment of liberation and omniscience through understanding the meaning of reality. And then the verse for this says, if things exist intrinsically, what good is it to perceive emptiness? Perception by way of conception binds. This is refuted here. So one could rephrase that as saying, if things existed by means of their own intrinsic nature, then what purpose, what good quality is there in seeing emptiness? And then the reply to that is, by conceiving of them in that way, and seeing them in that way, one is bound. And here, this is all negated. So the explanation of this is given in the commentary. If things exist intrinsically, what good would there be in perceiving or seeing emptiness, since it would be erroneous? Thinking of things as being real causes one to accumulate karma and thereby wander in samsara. So that line is saying that here the thinking of things as being real is, or that conception which misapprehends things as being real is the first of the 12 factors of dependent origination. It's the ignorance which is the basic source of samsara. And then out of that misapprehension of things as being real, one accumulates karma, and then the remainder of the factors of dependent origination arise, and all of samsara develops from that. But through fully understanding that all phenomena are devoid of essence, one gains liberation from samsara, worldly existence. Thus, as long as one sees things as real, because of conceptions that cling to their being real. So, on the one hand, there's the appearance of things as being real, and then on top of that, if one misapprehends them as being real, holds to them as existing in the way they appear, then one is bound to samsara. In this treatise, therefore, a real person and aggregates, which are the referent objects of conceptions of things as being real, the misapprehension of things as being real, these are all refuted by an extensive collection of reasoning. So here in this treatise, meaning the 400, all of these the referent objects, meaning if things were real, they would have to exist as they appear, and the way they appear as real, all of these are objects of negation which have been exhaustively negated through the reasoning which is employed throughout this treatise.
Oh yeah, that is it. Number you make it touch about Chilo to Tambani.
Again,
I don't do the last one. Oh, Chur Tamja Tomba de Ranshi may be Tsuji so Chur Tamja Tomba said, I need Kansere, Gacha Ranshi you don't be Tsuji Ranshi you don't be Tsuji so, Sumbatana, Dendeji Chur Tamja, Ranula Kelambadang. Mingawa, Serva, Chetamja Ranshi, Tomba Kelajang, Ane, Dendi Chetamja Ranula Kelam, but Mingawa, Ranshi Meba Tomba Jaba, you know.
So then there's a sutra passage quoted to illustrate this. All phenomena are empty by way of being devoid of essence. They have no essence. That's the way that, and so forth. Accordingly, this was written to teach the lack of essence, that things are devoid of essence or intrinsic existence, which does not contradict the acceptance in our system of all dependently originated phenomena.
Oh yeah, that you make a touch about Chilo to Tambani, Jimmy Bachi, Jimmy Jejawa, Timiji Dambayame. Tena di mechi Japanese to never use. That rang in Deva, no ribadang. ano nanjujibu umaranjuba la sowa 대다기 애네 가르래서나 ten신이 어디 예매 무슨 시와여라 아니 치대매봐 대송거래 랑게 다와 나를 발라서와 간다 소럽지 된 치다와 신도 마도배 아니 시와 다시 라주바잖아 가서 선선바잖아 시와 담바 여신 아니 치료지 된 타냐 돼야 매봐 나주지베를 랑주바게 시와 담바단 여바다 되고 말해지 시와 랑게 천이지 주마주지 아니 치된 타냐 돼야 매봐 시바 인상 ten시 예매 무슨我天气里面没什么影响啊，去了几太阳同样没把开了吧，天这位天气也没什么开了吧，但大气了都准备起来，是，太阳都你个原来原样，去了当希望你我的，俺你原来原样没样。七罗原来源于但希望也有个希望没那七罗也有没有个我但天气也没你个冲把的地方的他也对你个也行天的吧你个没把冲没起来是几没接下哇天一级拿下没的希望原来七罗没接哇天一个拿下马印是吧你个天的吧出吧当天的比等把你看样嘛也是，是吧？天的吧，啊，这怎么的？天的比等把看样嘛也不起来，几天把样没的，你个谈年的月经，工作几天把也不起来，七天当希望你个，哦呀，工作几天把也不起来，身体吧就这样。
So then next comes the demonstration or exposition that holding the extreme views of things existing or being existent or non-existent is erroneous, is perverse, the contrary of what is real, what is true. And this is given in verse 399. And then it says, those of our own school, our own schools of Buddhist philosophy, such as the Vijñapti Matra, Vijñapti Vadans, this is, the proponents of things being mere, Vijñapti is a tough term to translate. Sometimes you can translate it as just like information, mere, or mere consciousness that's producing some experience. So they don't because they don't understand the meaning of the scriptures correctly. Some of them would say that awareness or consciousness is real, and external objects do not exist even conventionally. So that pertains to the Vijñapti Vadans, and then some of the Swatantrika Madhyamikas would also say that, although they would differentiate by saying that some Swatantrika Madhyamikas would say that conventionally one can say that there are external objects, but not ultimately. And then some Swatantrika Madhyamikas would say that even conventionally there's no external objects, agreeing with the Yogacara or Vijñapti Vadans. So they hold that, and in order to show that sort of idea is perverse, erroneous, the Madhyamika position here is that conventionally one can say that both exist, but ultimately neither exists. They're all equivalent in that respect. So external objects and consciousness within the Madhyamika system here, it says conventionally they both exist, but ultimately neither exists. Neither of them is ultimately existent. And we would say that one exists and the other is non-existent. That sort of presentation of reality is not acceptable. And someone who says that there's nothing which is neither consciousness nor external objects are established ultimately, and neither of them as well is ultimate reality. And this is also the case in the Madhyamika system within the worldly, from the worldly perspective as well. Both of them exist conventionally, and both of them are phenomenal reality within this system here.
오야 근데 일단 다 가서래 치료당 전다 시원이가 연염도 연년다 매년 체가나 치료 매번送그 도연나야 아니 도대다 아니 장주들야 가서래 감좀들이 섬자모 시와가 되게 아니 세매심이 제법 가봐인지 치료 가봐 많이 봐 시 아니 치료 나와 랑가시 버기 치료 나와 유면데 이런 언제 나나 섬리나도 나와라 산점태는 마오 시와 되게 치료 가장 안에 노대 장전도 제디 도나 치료 여바지 치료당 시와 니고디 아니 연나온다 매년 연바디 아니 다 도요 공부해야 돼 우리로기 시외 세자 도바 대세자 맨나 시와 매 시와기 세자 치던 도바 아니 세자 치던 매나 아니 시와야 매바 대당 지지매 봐야지 대매지된 봐야 매세대 지바지장인 말이 是吧？因此，俺我们就比告诉人，在他写着出多上节了，从把帮行完别去了，从写着就爬到起别多一告诉，俺那去了当写完你不的，原年都送我的是好的，俺我们去真的干了，他现在没真的干了，俺那去了的写完原年没不的，得送过来的话，我第一张。
So now then, there are statements that one finds in the scriptures, in the sutras. For example, there's a statement in the that one finds where it says that all of this is mere mind, mind only, or mere mind. The whole world is mere mind. But some of these passages, although they can be taken literally, what they're actually the meaning of them is rejecting the notion of the Samkhya position, which posits some kind of internal knower, which is absolutely distinct from the material nature of things. And so, in order to reject that kind of position, it's giving the position that things are merely mental in nature, and so that's acceptable as far as it goes, but it has to be interpreted correctly within the context and of the opponent of that particular that exposition. But then there are other passages, for example, in the Lankavatara Sutra, where it's explained that there's no external objects, and it's given in some detail showing that there are no external objects. And that's also accepted as a scriptural statement, but that within the Madhyamika school, that's accepted only as a provisional teaching, which is intended for people that need to be drawn along by that kind of teaching. For the time being, for them, they need to understand, or they need that sort of expedient means to rely upon the notion that things are merely mental in order to develop to understanding how things really are. And then, however, the actual position that is articulated and held is that which one finds in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and it's held that when speaking of an internal awarenesses and external objects, the objects of awareness, we would say that they're equally existent and equally non-existent. That is, they all exist conventionally, and one can establish the existence of external objects through conventional means of knowledge, just as much as one can establish internal awareness through conventional means of knowledge. So in that respect, they're existent, but they're equally non-existent in that they don't exist in some real fashion or by means of their own intrinsic nature, and one can establish that as well, that internal knowers and external objects, the objects of perception and so forth, are equally non-existent in that respect. And this can be established both from the conventional perspective, using conventional means of valid cognition, as well as when one subjects them to the analysis of their final nature, and that's the position that has to be taken following the Master Nagarjuna's interpretation of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras.
Oh yeah, tenda tanya du pompong aja yoji tenda ba meba yunzan te na ani semda semjundi dambar yola chiden tanya du meji joba niwa mare chiden semzamba ge semsumji dambar yoji chiroji de tanya du meji 타녀도 뭐지 저번이가 내 마이노 대나 다다지 시원하래 대신이가 돼 아니 대나 치료지 된다 시원이가 지대나 잡아다다 엄마가 작게라와 차오
So that being the case, because that's so, then we would say that conventionally all five aggregates exist, but they're not ultimately existent. They don't ultimately exist, but they're conventionally existent. And that being so, we can say that that mind and the mental factors that arise, that accompany primary forms of consciousness, to say that they're real, or to say that, on the other hand, that external objects don't exist even conventionally, one is unable to say that, and meaning that that's not the case. And therefore, we have to accept, we Madhyamikas necessarily must accept external objects and awarenesses, both as they are commonly understood to exist within the world.
Oh yeah, that she didn't carry any children to true nang zamla tela shakuarda, Nara, nang zam terra, any so chirurgeon or nang zam tela, any chirurgeon, Jenny. They are any car to Sakava to what is and Cheta Jarangela, Brangana Madrubala, two by in Zam. Casa Rangana Madrum Chuzulia Bashena. You are that to tell Masamadura. Tenshi Yamichi Ribalaba Chenila, Rangi Tani to Chuba down, Madubagi, Chetamje, Rangi Tani, Madubala, any casa, Julian Joba, Joshua, and Asha de Leba Siena. Any chiro tentem image, any jotu grace, 10 men any new mares and Italian Bulasonase, Zawade, and a Gachala Tugar.
So now then, as far as the existence of external objects is concerned, we can, when we're saying they exist, that means they merely appear. They're mere appearances. That's as far as one can go as far as the actual existence of external objects is concerned. They merely appear. Now, when that is said, they merely appear, how does one establish this? How does one understand that? When one tries to investigate the ultimate final nature of things, whether one's talking about external objects or internal awarenesses, and applies ultimate analysis to them, then there's no findable essence of them. There's nothing that one arrives at as a foundation or absolute basis for these things appearing to us. So now, in order to really understand this statement that there are external objects, but they're mere appearances, that mere qualification of it, to really understand that properly, one needs to be able to properly distinguish between things existing by means of their own intrinsic identity, which is not the case, and the fact that things are not established by means of their own intrinsic identity. So this all comes down then to the delineation of the object of negation and understanding properly how to distinguish between things not existing by means of their own intrinsic identity versus their existence by means of their own intrinsic identity. So it says in the essence of good explanations that if one properly understands how all phenomena are don't exist by means of intrinsic identity, then one's able to establish this properly. One can determine, explain properly and establish properly how all phenomena are mere appearance, but without that, there's no way to do it.
Tata Rebecca made about it, Tata Ribito, Jachamona, Nambama so, Lever Kappa now. Tombani to Mavala, see Jim Minibar, and Digache. Tata Kuru Chula land about Minimes. Tadana Chula land about Jua. And it is Dambala. ngomba chamba ta chu te shi shi we tamba la ngomba chamba ta chunga churo sa ane ti chimden de ji tamba la da len de ba de nu go me do ti chimden de yu che la tamba ta da la zu ji chen ne ane jama len de ba jong gu de se na o chu ji re wa de ni zhen ba xi de de da ko la ja la 电大机会超用是怎么样呢？那么现在主办嘞，升级牛吧四张，那么现在主办嘞升级牛吧四张，大绝没办的，越大没大也没去看了去年也没办，开了月人牛不呢，两个脚吧牛把赢，牛嘛赢是你，你看说那些钱的大，我看了，我们看了，我们探究看了，我让些就越把当。 我中山家没行，我没把他让星期也把出版给原没看见个让星期出版没赢，没办法赢，让星期出版当看谁也把你个没赢吧，大体给他了，原没你个当你个没赢吧的写，看了呀，你话他结尾确也把没赢，确也把明白开了，是吧？我的。 体育不能两个脚把丢嘛，两个脚把丢嘛，没赢的，开把当把你嘛完了，水就把你，哪个来这么知名的把当，家级学员4个全名的把7个敲送了。
So next comes finally that it's impossible to, or one's unable to give some kind of rational refutation of one who is free from the extremes. And then this is given in the introduction to verse 400. When assertions regarding the things being real and so forth have been thoroughly refuted in this way, it is impossible to state any refutation of assertions regarding emptiness. And then the opponent comes back and says, even though we are unable to answer you at present, you will receive an answer. There will be those who make great effort on behalf of the Tathagata's teaching. Answer, that is a futile hope, or it says here, actually, your hope is, your hope, this hope of yours is false, futile. If we held a faulty thesis, it could be refuted by proving the converse. But, and then verse 400 says, against one who holds no thesis that things exist, do not, or do and do not exist, counter-arguments cannot be raised, no matter how long one tries. No Madhyamikas hold the erroneous theses that things are intrinsically existent, that even the slightest thing is non-existent, that non-existent things are intrinsically both existent and non-existent, or neither. No matter how long one tries, no counter-arguments can be raised. You should understand that refuting skilled proponents of emptiness is as impossible as drawing pictures in space or causing space pain by beating it with an iron bar.
Oh yeah, that's quite a sum. Oh, I'm just about getting daddy. That's all I'm going to see what some short. No, but change your body. I need to just about get it together. Better Java, need 2 months and a model shoot a model so that didn't. 因为已经明白规则，已经没了你全面明白的，让他在外，他这工作线，开了2个国家人都他，是而你们个已经明白规则往哪些，规则性，明白了你们也全把给你我明白哪些。当你对别让他别单位，俺呢，谈真个青蛙规全把切行，开了2个国家人都帮，是对于此结果我。 因为猜到这怎么那么就把切吧，那边当那么两了光把蛋白的切吧，然后切吧就别指望我，然后切吧就别指望我。 Yeah.
So then there's a note here that Master Dharma Dahasa gave one analogy or a story for each stanza of the first 8 chapters, but fearing an excess of words, they've merely been referenced but not discussed in detail. And then the summarizing stanza for this chapter goes, the sun's light dispels all darkness. Darkness has no power to destroy the sun's light. So the analogy there is for emptiness. The knowledge of emptiness destroys the entirety of the confusion that clouds beings' minds. The correct view destroys all extreme conceptions, banishing any opportunity for controversy. And then this is the 16th chapter from the 400 on yogic deeds, showing how to meditate on settling the procedure between spiritual guides and students. And then this concludes the commentary on the 16th chapter, showing how to meditate on settling the procedure between spiritual guides and students from the Essence of Good explanation, explanation of the 400 on the yogic deeds of bodhisattvas.
그래서 어야 다시 와 주고 되라니 땡주 간 거 잡아다 같이 가면 주적한 거 주고 땡주 신대체 뭐 전주서 뭐 러버 파빨리 상하는 잡아고 전주서 몇 남자 이제 봐 시제 왜 틀리고 저봐 뒤 저봐 러변 나와 잡아 니 지남새 줘서 니와 주적한 거 줘봐나 봐 가지 배주 좀 이제 배 공가 잡으면 돼 가지고 뭐 전설인지도 저 러변이 좀 돼서 잠시 재세수我讲那当，可就老早把东华集熊猫了出去，把这你们这几家了把可就，感觉就几千年级了把带了嘛，这外轮的爬上年级，路中有啥切啥子，爬了的半年的话，他打说估计中了解决，现在去别熊肉药啊，前面这边没单吧，水路让个就别俺多给路的老板钱吧，没事呢。提着人来呢，叫我那让居民他超玩切别了。萨拉马这做不这话，一兄弟吹点可怜俺个线，但这不行。怕被些把新对年吧看，大老面是江北到县北，看的地了龙比朝见了，那么他家那么就说这里，他这我们老啥啥去吧，这边这话给我其实是比这了就比这话呢，特别的话，那么托进大家听呢，这了他们就提着些的那样没得，那么就特上官边上学的，关键就有恐怕他把说，哦，现在的呢。跟人家有光芒头发说，跟人家有光芒头发说，这大概哦，这个天上，咱就看个这吧，直接看个就把咱就什么的，那大概是光芒头发说呀。
哦，这个嘞，那边的，
那俩这是那啥？
哦。
但就学校吧，学那些两个学你不学校话的，那我人不觉得介绍介绍，当把说能对不？那么哪个上班的教我的教育单吧，也有苦级名额为那么查身外不完没到个什么家长不的教我，同我们那样的样子。国情东华就熊猫的这个等你怎么啊？全部咋当公家生给了说话，等你怎么他们过完了，等你这位人路我全部，全部的钱那个等你全那个大约送年的兔子去比，什么全部就是他把人大我兄弟录这些香港来的，人大我兄弟这第一条我要的，是这个是吧？这话呢，就他们去这边买了200多吧，有的他也全部老三这边摆起香港呢，也是你是不是有人就担心，天气这边这边个人来这把妈妈各种他们人就主要是不去干的。那把这位人对一个把那东西，人家怎么人家缺家喽？对这位他妈人不是缺他们家他先家了，有人对那我绝对是呀。
That was the remainder of the text. Again, just read that straight through. So the colophon, this concludes the treatise of 400 stanzas on the yogic deeds of bodhisattvas from the mouth of Aryadeva, spiritual son at the exalted Naga's feet, Naga being short for Nagarjuna. He was born miraculously from the heart of a lotus on the island of Singhala. Having crossed the ocean of our own and others' tenets himself, he made the middle way most clear by distinguishing between correct and incorrect views. It was translated and the meaning settled in the temple of Ratnagupta Vihara in the center of the glorious Kashmiri city of Anupamapura by the Indian abbot Shukshmajana and the Tibetan translator Batsat Nimadrak. This concludes the explanation both of the great trailblazer and Bodhisattva, the master Aryadeva's work 400 stanzas on the yogic deeds of bodhisattvas, and of its commentary by the master Chandrakirti. It was translated from the Sanskrit into Tibetan language in the temple of Ratnagupta Vihara in the center of the glorious Kashmiri city of Anupamapura by the Indian abbot Shukshmajana, son of the Brahmin Sajjana from the paternal line of the Brahmin Ratnavajra, and by the Tibetan translator Batsat Nimadrak, who had consummate understanding of all texts on Sutra and Tantra. The meaning of the text was properly settled by explaining and listening to it. May the one predicted by the conqueror who attained the supreme state, as well as Aryadeva and the glorious Chandrakirti, who most clearly elucidated Nagarjuna's good system, rest victoriously on the crowns of our heads. May the one predicted by the conqueror who attained the supreme state, as well as Aryadeva and the glorious Chandrakirti. Well, that's repeated too, isn't it? Yeah. So there's a repetition. Yeah. Unable to bear misinterpretation of this system through the misconceptions of those who follow their own presuppositions, who lack the flawless eye of reasoning and ignore the textual systems of the great trailblazers, I have explained the words and meaning of this text simply, commenting in a clear, unconfused, and complete way on the paths that mature the mind and bring about release for all people with a Mahayana disposition. Since Aryadeva's thought is hard to ascertain and my mind is poor, my acquired knowledge weak, may my spiritual guides and deities forgive whatever errors there may be. Through any immaculate virtue created by my efforts to illuminate the good Madhyamika path free from extremes, may all transmigrators bound in the prison of worldly existence attain the peerless happiness of liberation. May I too in all future lives never be separated from a spiritual guide of the great supreme vehicle, and through fully entering this path by listening, thinking, and meditating, may I obtain the state of an omniscient conqueror. This essence of good explanations, explanation of the 400, was written at the insistence of Lama Namkha Zangpa, who cherishes his precious precepts and holds the three sets of vows, and of Lama Draksengwa, exceptionally tireless in bearing the responsibility of spreading the subduer's teaching. They urged me again and again from Upper Dokam with lavish and repeated flower-like offerings. It was written also at the assistance of Kunga Singhi of Zetang, a great holder of the three sets of teachings, who has heard this text of Sutra and Tantra many times, and at the insistence of numerous other scholars of the three sets of teaching. It was written at Drokri Wuche Ganden Napargyawe Ling by the logician and fully ordained monk Dharma Rinchen. This was made possible by the great kind explanations received directly from the noble, venerable, and holy Rendawa Shunilodru. Rendawa Shunilodru wrote another commentary which Gyaltsab is referring to. A great follower of the conqueror with consummate understanding, especially of all external and internal dependently arising things are like the reflection of the moon in water. And from the great omniscient one in this time of degeneration, whose prayer to hold the excellent teaching of the conquerors is perfectly accomplished, the glorious and good foremost precious Losang Drapa. They are the father and son, the dust beneath whose feet I have long and respectfully venerated. The scribe was Rinchen Chirgyal, holder of the three sets of teaching and observant of his vows. By virtue also of this, may the precious teaching of the conquerors spread and flourish in all ways, in all directions, and endure for a long time.
So
I'll start reading from the outset again.
공부르르자라 그거 주니되나 뭐냐 바로 파다에 노래 쳐봐요. 강글로 있어볼 거 봐서 삼비 투지 시윤 그바사 자비여지 조이 멤버지 이제 사람라 집을 신다지면 샤바 또 가라니 내셔 고바 페이지도 간대잖아 편바 쳐위 땡지 집에 나셔 여와 또 세와야 단디 네 저기 따다 네 지자위 실용지 단이 다전 때 그잖아서 휴와 나시 전에를 도시다 세론도 지파 부차체 아니 네 대화 또 안다와 잡아 시작을 대화 아니 당 아니 대 렌다와 신을 이렇게 대화 요아를 다 든저를 맞대스마 시tum나 던저세 아니 저 아치테 가서를 니랑라마 대스타 로토 체상으로 당톤을 하고 싫어요 아니 되면 저어디 아니 자시 직신 그와 다시 지진기 다니가마 쇼와나 세체니 아니 아랍진이 두바데 코코베를 바당 아니 아주 좁게 바당 아니 rab지 니시버도 아니 저강 체체네 다나 아니 편도요 됐어.
So now I've given you a brief overview of this treatise on the 400 verses of Aryadeva by Lord Gyaltsab-je, and this exposition then is following actually the following Chandrakirti's commentary, which explains Lord Aryadeva's text in detail, and then likewise, as Gyaltsab-je has said, it follows the commentary of Lord Rendawa as well. And so I've given a brief overview of this, and then at the beginning of it, I went back and did the beginning of the text to read give the oral transmission of this as well, to initiate that. And so this, if one is able to, one should, as much as possible, try to gain an understanding of the meaning of this through continued study. The essential meaning of this coincides exactly with what we've already expressed in the exposition of the 3 chapters from the basic verses on wisdom. The subject matter is the same. So if one's able to study that, that's very good to review that. And then, like as that is explained in the great commentary on the basic verses on the middle way that were given by Lord J. Rinpoche.
아니 다야 중재와 된데 봐 또무도와 있나야 아니 디나라 데메탄라 배기 아니 타다카소레 타중기 리바당 지주라가 리바 쪼데 아니 라비 체중 테나네 라리 징기나라 아니 숑망보 메바 아니 뉴뉴 아니 로라 차데오양 된데 요아레라 데 롱리 가서 롱기 저와 제셋 마하토니 전님보디 땅아베 라빈 최종기 안에 가서 그다음에 주비단 최다음에 주비를 받지 등기 된저 마야 아버지 세잖아 아니 양편도 싫어요 그랬어.
So then if one's unable to study these vast texts and all of their detail, and doesn't have the time or the ability to study these in great detail, then nevertheless one can gain a good understanding of this as a beginner by, for example, looking at the way it's explained in the intermediate Lamrim text, the intermediate stages of the path. In there, in the greater treatise on the stages of the path, this is treated extensively, but there it's given with a lot of scriptural quotation and arguments and such, which makes it more difficult to gain an initial comprehension of. So if one is able to study it as it's expounded in the intermediate stages of the path, then that's very good, because there the scriptural quotations are largely omitted, and all of the subject matter is there, but it's presented in a simpler, more accessible format.
Oh yeah.
Om Benza Bhumi Ahum Wanche Seje Saji Om Benza Reke Ahum Che Jari Goyuki Korwe Dori Jawore Rajaliva Olo Jambole No Bananje Chandrami Lidan Liva Mayadam Mayashen Yandanda Jojo Draminyanda Draminyanda Rimboche Ribo Basamji Shin Tejeba Mamyan Baye Lodo Kolo Rimboche Norbo Rimboche Lambo Rimboche Lambo Rimboche Lajo Rimboche Tacho Rimboche Dajan Rimboche Terjemboye Gomba Noma Garama Medoma Nazama Dejama Nadamurje Do Cholena Vejan Yusola Dami Banjo Bizo Zawa Neba Tanji Yedo Wajeda Kenjenza Kibaji Bandang Madamana Ebardu Yang Lewe Shenyan Jembo Zome say churchy lo sang dancing joke zambo jangane tek pachimbo sungju sap mo lek pato be pachi tan rocky yendo jingambu wagi o tuje drowe dundu she so so she me kyang dat so no ama yo na ge taran yambe semchen tam jela
tu se wa shin bi ko ne
jin he love to so sa